All right, guys. So let's get started. I'm sure a few more people will join. I'm really excited that we have Noah Rubin joining us today. Just a brief intro. Noah is a junior Wimbledon champion, which we could just stop and talk about that. That's it. That's enough of a title. But on top of that, he's an American champion, won nationals, hard courts and singles and in doubles. Then went on for 1 year, had an amazing college career playing finals of NCAAs, singles championships. Then he turns pro, has been a career high of 125, has an amazing career, has beaten a lot of good players, including John Isner. And on top of that, which I really like, he has an amazing online resource called Behind The Racquet, where he kind of does this, where he interviews some of the top tennis players, or actually not just top, everyone on the tour. That's the whole point. And get to see the behind the scenes of what it's really like to be on a professional tour, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I really feel that he's somebody that can speak about from juniors to pros, college, every area. So, Noah, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Is there anything I missed in the intro?
Oh, God. No, you did a pretty good job. Yeah, it seems like Junior Wimbledon's always the one that sticks out, but still trying to get past that a little bit. It's been a few years.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the Junior Wimbledon. One of the first questions we have from one of our players, Eita Mishima, he wanted to know, when you were ages 10 to 14, how did you train and how was it different? Were there any differences in the winter and the summer? Because we know that you're from New York training, so that's why I think that question.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a difference. I mean, I was one of those players that, I would work with the USTA here and there, but I stayed home. I was fortunate enough to have kind of that nice base here in New York, which I wanted to have kind of that normal life mixed with the tennis world, because around, I think I was 11 when I first traveled internationally for the first time. So I was starting to do that, but I wanted to have that kind of normal life. I was still in school. So yeah, I mean, the training was probably about 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then the sixth day I would play around 4 hours a day, but I kept it pretty light, throughout that whole point. I know a lot of players were doing 4 hours consistently. I was doing mostly 2 hours a day. And then summers would be sometimes a little bit more, but just thankfully we got to play outside of that point in New York. So definitely interesting, because not a lot of players get to stay home while training, but I was fortunate enough to have a good group of guys around me.
Nice. And one of the things you're known is being very fast on court, and just you don't give any points away. You're like a Rafa in a sense. Is that always been the case? Was that developed, or is that a natural thing?
The speed was kind of there. It developed solely because I loved hitting balls and running every ball down. So I know a lot of kids nowadays, if the ball's 2 inches out to the left or right or deep or whatever the case may be, they stop it. I was that guy that even if it was 6 feet long or 6 feet wide, I was running after that ball. So I developed almost these quick, fast muscles that were used to running down balls that nobody expected me to get to. But that was just who I was as a player. And I think a lot of my training has been on court. And that's why I think within the 2 hour session, I don't need necessarily 3.5 hours, because I feel like I put in more work than other players do.
So high intensity, high versus high volume.
Don't let a ball go.
So if, obviously the training has worked, but looking back at it now, if you're again 10 to 14, is there something that you did differently, or is there something you would double down on, said, this was great, I should have done more of?
Yeah, I think the amount of tennis was perfect. I think I would have worked a little bit more on building the physical base of myself, whether that means getting a lot of great routines in place from that early age, warming up, cooling down, stretching, working on bands before and after, just developing a lot of those, because you're prone to injury as you play more tennis, as you get into college and then professional level, you're playing a lot more. So yes, I think at times I wish I extended my practices just a little bit, but also most importantly, having that cool down and warm up and making sure my routines were in place, because it happened a little later in my career, 15, 16, 17, when I really started getting those, where it would have been nice at 10, 11 to be more flexible, to have those routines already.
Nice. So when we fast forward now to what we talked about, Junior Wimbledon, and I guess that was just like a great year. From your standpoint, when you were going into, let's say, first round Wimbledon, were you saying, all right, I feel great, I'm winning this tournament, my game is perfect for grass? What was the mindset going in? And I would just
Yeah,
start
I
with
mean,
that.
backtracking a few years, I reached my career high ITF ranking when I was actually 15, 16 at 6th in the world. So that's when I was really playing my majority of international tournaments. I stopped, played futures, then got my ranking high enough that allowed me to actually, I didn't play first round, I was in qualifying.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so that final year, the only ITFs I played were French Open and Wimbledon, and besides Kalamazoo, of course. But so my ATP ranking of 520 in the world got me into qualifying, and then first played the French, which I lost second round to Quentin Halys, who is obviously a good ATP player now. But then, I was like, oh, I think I'm done. And then my father, and actually one of the few credits to John McEnroe at the time, he's like, just go play. It's your last tournament. Just go play it. My father and I went 24 hours before first round qualifying of juniors. Just wanted to enjoy it, use it almost as a vacation. And week and a half later, I was holding a trophy. So it was kind of a really incredible experience that caught us by surprise, you could say the least. But yeah, it was a really great moment for us.
Do you think, just listening to you, was it you didn't have as high expectations and that kind of made you play free? Would you say that?
I think that's an overall, you're encapsulating a huge part of tennis is this idea of I'm going to go enjoy, I've worked for many years on something. I want to see it in action, but I have no expectation of winning, losing, doing whatever, which happens to a lot of players. I mean, once either you become really good at a certain point and then you're the one that guys want to take out, or you're trying to make your way, but you always have some type of expectation. It's really tough to fight that. I just went into Wimbledon saying, hey, whatever happens. And, it kind of relieves the pressure that at any point a loss would have been okay. It really would have been okay. And I think that's a tough place to get to, but that's where a lot of pros are, but it takes many years to get there.
So I'm going to go one step deeper in that because I'm curious for a lot of these kids. Now, when you're practicing, you're not thinking that way, are you? Because how do you, because for me, it's like when you're practicing, you have to have that mindset versus tournament. Because if you're practicing, like you're just there to have fun, you're missing on those little tangibles. Or you can correct me and tell me from your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was very fortunate to have a great support system that distinguished between, okay, we're going to be very focused at certain points, but missing a ball long or missing this, it's okay because we're working on something. It was always very focused. It was always very, there was very thoughtful
Process.
Behind everything we did. But at the same time, we wouldn't get upset if with losses. We wouldn't get upset if you made 2 errors in a row. If that was the right thing, if that was what we were practicing, it's okay. Because I know a lot of people that go other directions. Because I actually switched once I kind of early on in my career after college, I switched the mentality to a lot of pressure in practice, feeling that, and it actually hindered my game a lot. So now I've gone back to, I'm practicing this, whatever happens, happens. Let's make sure that we're getting better every day, but not put this pressure on every single shot that has to be perfect.
Got it. Nice. And just to last 2 questions about Wimbledon, holding up that trophy and winning. I guess I wouldn't forget the trophy. Let's go the last point you're winning and you won the point. What is that feeling like and what's going on through your head at the time?
Somehow this just came on Twitter because they're replaying stuff because there's nothing else to watch. I saw it and I didn't have a reaction. I almost forgot that I didn't have a reaction because I was so shocked. Again, to even be there was a shock. Not that I didn't think my game belonged, but just all the surrounding aspects of it. So, after winning that, I was like, wow, I mean, that's kind of put a title on everything I've worked for. And more than that, it gave, my father was with me, who traveled a lot, but it gave him a trophy, to say that everything he went through, everything my family went through, I mean, both my parents, everybody who was a part of my life sacrificed so much. And this was kind of like, there's no money behind it, but this was like a token to say, thank you for all the work. We did this together.
Oh, that's really great. And so so after that you went hardcourts and but now you go from that, you talked about playing no pressure. I'm sure at hardcourts now everybody's gunning for you.
It is very, very tricky. I mean, Kalamazoo is one of those strange tournaments that you play ITS for a long time and then you come back and you're playing in this tremendous draw. You could lose to anybody in the draw. some kids have absolutely no pressure coming up against us. So there's a lot of different things. And then you know that this is the US. You're playing against your peers. This is a true competition to see who is the best one this week, who is the best tennis player in the US right now. So it was very difficult. And, to play so many matches and get through and to play all these top Americans and, to finally, that was my first 3 out of 5 set match in the finals, it's like new pressures come into play. And to take that title, I think, honestly, for my coach that I worked with for my whole life, but now I'm working with again. He said recently that was one of the most incredible moments of his life because he hasn't had somebody that did that well. And that was like that's a tournament that we all hold near and dear to our hearts. That's just, as an American in tennis, Kalamazoo is the pinnacle. So he's known about it his whole life, 50 years plus. So for him to have a title, again, I know it sounds weird and cheesy that I'm giving these to other people, but these are the people that worked so hard for me, and I can never, put into words what it means until holding a trophy like that.
Well, I mean, I guess that's impressive, and then you get a wild card from there. So let me pause that for a second.
Yeah.
So how was the decision to continue to go to Wake Forest or go to Wake Forest versus just going out straight, trying out the pros, the tour full on?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a really quick decision. It was around early July where early June, mid-June, that I decided to go to college. That was the first decision. It was, am I going to go to school or am I going to go to college? So I chose college. Then after Wimbledon, I remember being on a boat and I called UVA, and that's when I decided between UVA and Wake Forest, which were my last 2 schools, which was an impossible decision. It was like my first breakup of all time, getting on the phone with UVA, who was the #1 school at the time, and telling them I'm going to go to Wake Forest, who was 35 in the country at the time. So, people never assumed that I would go to school, and I definitely didn't, think about me going to Wake Forest. So it was a lot. It was a lot to handle. So Kalamazoo didn't really change that aspect. I did have a moment after Wimbledon where I was like, whew, is this the time where we just take a chance and go pros? But, still, with having the education and having the ability to go back to school and just doing something different as well, I really want to prove to myself that I can conquer college tennis. That decision was going to stand regardless of any win. So, it took a lot, and it took we never did in my past, but it took a lot not to listen to other people and what they said. And I decided to go to Wake Forest even, right before Kalamazoo, and continued, even though I was late to school because of the wild card.
Nice. Well, Armand Patel wanted to know, how did you balance academics and tennis your freshman year?
Difficult, and especially difficult with Wake Forest wasn't that huge of a athletic school. So it wasn't one of these schools that has all these rumors that kids do the work for them and all this other stuff. We were in real classes. I'm doing the work. So it was difficult. Was I reaching for a 4.0 average? No. But I wanted to get a 3.0. I wanted to make sure I was keeping up with everything. Early on in my life, starting 11 or 12, I was very independent. My time management was great. I was used to balancing so many different things. So being a student athlete wasn't that different for me. It just, it took it to another level. So again, I was pretty prepared for it, but knew after a certain amount of time that, I was going to enjoy a lot of these aspects, and Wake was a great year for me.
And I guess there's just so much to talk about. I could just get stuck on the college years because we have a few juniors in this webinar and a couple seniors, and maybe that's for another time. But I guess I'll just ask your favorite college memory, and then decision to leave college. And one of the things, I believe that you still got paid to go to school, right? Because you're one of the years of a new scholarship, or is that correct or no?
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that.
Are you still eligible to come back to Wake Forest?
Yes, I can't play tennis, obviously, but I can finish out my degree. Yes, that was.
Well, maybe you can explain a little bit about that. Sorry.
Yeah, that really helped the decision. I was one of the first players, I think, if not the first, that got this ability from a few schools that if I go and finish one full year, not just a semester, I have the ability to get an extra 4 years on top of that, any point in my life, to finish out my degree, which basically allowed.
Well, that's incredible.
It's a huge opportunity when you think about God forbid, an accident would have taken place, let's say 3 weeks after I left school, I could have gone back to school, finished my degree. Yeah, maybe not play tennis, but at least I didn't put all my eggs in one basket with my professional tennis. It gives me this chance just in case to go back.
Nice. So your favorite experience from college? Is it the team chemistry? Is it the rides, or is it the getting to the finals?
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think my favorite memory, I think, if anything, was one of my worst memories was getting to the finals, to be honest. Because I was up 6-2, 5-3, 30 all in the finals, a few points away from winning the title there. So that was probably one of my toughest memories. But yeah, it was just having that team atmosphere. I mean, it was just incredible. I think, I honestly might have stayed another year with the perspective I have now in the hindsight, just because it doesn't happen too often in tennis. And that's one of the things I'm trying to change in tennis right now, is bringing this team atmosphere, this team competition, which I think the fans and players love and tennis needs a little bit more of. So, yeah, I mean, I remember ACC finals where, I had a really tough match where I actually beat the guy I lost to in finals of NCAAs, and number 2 guy won. It was just, I just remember that feeling and the blood pumping and going crazy and screaming across all courts and feeling like the energy was never going to die down. I think that's, it was very tough moments because you were getting the energy from other players and you thought that the screaming would hinder yourself, but you just got amped up, and it was really cool. And again, you could find it in Davis Cup, which I played, Junior Davis Cup, and you could find it, in a few other places, but that's, it was very unique.
Nice. Well, Kate and Belle and Manuel, they wanted to know how your game has sustained, and how is it similar and how has it changed from juniors to college and pros?
Yeah, I think my coach always said that I did a very good job of seeing the level, so getting up there. We never stayed at an age group for too long. He would put me up, I would see the level, and within weeks, I would raise my game to that level. So it was always a very organic and natural feel. I mean, there were points during my early on the pro, where I ran into some difficulties and I thought that I had to rush and change my style of game. But now we're finding that, I have one of these games. It's tough, but it's gotten me to where I am now that, it's not that massive serve, massive forehand that, in any moment I can win a tournament. It's going to take some experience. It's going to take some time to evolve my game to where, instead of 5 feet behind the baseline, I'm now 2 feet behind the baseline. It's all about finding the comfort, and it takes some time for that. It's not rushing. So we knew what I did well, and we wanted to evolve that organically over extended periods of time. So I got faster. I got fitter. My serve just was placed better over time. These are things that I learned almost on my own, obviously with some help, but just from seeing the higher level and raising my game to what I thought was necessary within my own capabilities.
So when you say seeing the level, how much are you, I guess you have to be a student of the game, but as far as video and scouting of other players, whether it's how they practice or right before the match, how seriously do you take that?
Opponents, not as much. When I'm in the match, I'm a thoughtful, intellectual thinker, so it gets very difficult for me personally. I know a lot of players that works very well for, but I need to keep it simple on court, so I need 1 or 2 things. But as I've always watched film on the top players, seeing what I can, even just little things that I can pick from them that I can add to my game. For me, early on in my life, I mean, obviously the technology has improved greatly over the past 10 years of how much video and slow motion and this and analytics that you could find. When I grew up, I was, literally, we would just put myself in the next group. Sometimes we would film practices, but I would just see, I was a very good learner of, okay, this didn't work. And I would just know that. And I would know I would have to move, and subconsciously I would have to move 5 feet behind the baseline this way and move to the left this way and just prepare certain ways. So I was fortunate to be gifted with that knowledge, but it was a lot more of, why does Federer do this and why does he do it so well? And what does it take to get to that point? That helped a lot.
Do you, when you said you do 1 or 2 things, so for most of your matches, what percent is like, this is me, and what percent is, I'm going to make an adjustment going into it? Or is it just like, this is me, and then as I feel things on, I'm going to make that adjustment?
When I'm playing my best tennis, it's the latter. It's usually, here are the 2 things I want to focus on for myself. And then if that's not working, well, we have an idea. For the most part, I know every player I come up against. So I know if those two things are going to be blatantly obvious for them to counter or not. So for the most part, it isn't. So if they're playing well and something's really on for them that day, I will make adjustments throughout. But for the most part, I go into the match with two things I know I'm focusing on. And I know if I do well, chances are I win that match that day. Percentages are in my favor.
Got it. I want to pause with you, Noah, for a second. So I'm going to ask our guests. So we have kind of 4 or 5 main areas in tennis. We have like technical, tactical, mental, and physical. So I want everybody to type on the messenger what they believe is their strength. So I want to see what they believe is their strength, and then from there we'll know my next question.
Okay.
So come on. We're looking for full participation from everyone. Let's go. So it's a technical, tactical, mental, or physical, and we have emotional as well. But physical, okay. That's your strength. Mental, Max, okay. See what else we got. Physical from Sage, for sure. Tactical, mental. Let's see what else we got. Physical, technical. We got a lot of different strengths. Physical, mental. Mental, physical. Okay, so let's go with that. No, I'll ask you, what is, out of those areas, what's your strength and what is your, I don't want to call it weakness, weaker area.
Yeah, I think it's funny for me, physical and mental go hand in hand. For
Good.
me, mental is I'm going to make it a nightmare for my opponent, and it's just going to be an absolute battle. But with that being said, I know I can do that because my physical capabilities allow me to do that. So I know I'm one of the most fit guys out there. I know I can last. I know I can run down balls. So with that, I connect those, and I'm like, it's going to be an absolute war for you to beat me. You might be able to beat me that day, but I know deep down it's going to be a war, and I'm going to mentally drain you down with my physicality almost. So those have always been kind of combined for me. And on the weak side, it really, mental is my strength, but when that is gone, which I've had at times throughout my career for months at a time, whether it's coming back from injury or whatever the case may be, that really hinders my tennis. So when my mental is off just a little bit, that is when I take real dips in performance and see many losses in a row, which I can't handle. So mental, I say, is my strength, because if I lose that, I lose, who I am as a player.
But that's really good, because so going with Omar Abosada, he wanted to know what keeps you going after losing tough matches. So now you just mentioned that you hate doing it. So what keeps you going? How do you get back on the horse?
Yeah, again, I think it's knowing it's process goals. It's one, and I say this and I mean it. It's a tough thing to say, but that's the system of tennis right now. Is you don't get into tennis for winning matches. You don't win that often. As a junior, I won often. Yeah, that's great. And I was one of that very few percentages that do. But at the pros, you don't win that often, no matter who you are, unless you're the top 1%, like the Federers or the Nadals. So I played to compete. So once you go in this, on the court, obviously you want to win. But if you're playing just for winning, you're going to have problems. I play to improve. I play to see everything I work for get better during the match time, to work on things, to improve, to compete, to, make it a nightmare for my opponent. So I get off the court. I'm like, okay, I lost, but this was fun. I did this well. I'm going to take this into my next match. Because if you're playing just for winning and losing, you're going to lose a lot, and it's going to really put a damper on your morale. And I think, as a player, that's something that's really tough to handle. So I think it's changing your perspective about why you step on that court.
Do you have any rituals, routines, or mantras, or for your mental to get you back on track? Do you have anything that you do, whether it's pre-match, like music, or you listen to something, or during match to reset? Do you want to share any secrets?
I used to have a lot more than I do now, but then I just played too many matches, and it became almost like a habit where I had to break it because I was tired from doing all my rituals. Now it's very simple. Now I just try to allow myself to slow down my thought process, slow down the nerves, because I think a lot in the sport of tennis can happen very quickly. You can get on a losing streak, whether it's points or matches. So I think about slowing things down, whether things are going well or not. Take a second to yourself, whether it's off the court or not. Visualize, meditate. I know those are words that scare people, but it can really mean you just sitting on your couch and thinking, without anything else going on, thinking about what are things that are going well or not well. How can you fix them? Are you doing everything in your power to be the tennis player you want to be? So I think taking those seconds, and whether that is pre-match to calm down your nerves and to get focused, or post-match to think about all the things you did well or not, I think it's very important.
No, thank you. So going along with that, April Gift wanted to ask I'm assuming it has, but was there a moment, at what moment did you feel like your hard work has paid off?
Oh, that's a tough question. Obviously Wimbledon was one of them. Yeah, so I should go backwards. So Copa del Cafe was a grade 1 event that I won. That was one of the first events that I was like, wow, I think I'm a tennis player, which sounds funny because I've done things before that, but that really was one line in the sand. And then I think my first Grand Slam win against Benoit Paire, which was, I qualified for a challenger, won that challenger, got the wild card to play the Australian Open, beat Benoit Paire 6-6 and 6. And I was like, wow, I think I could, he was 17 in the world at the time. I was like, well, I guess I could play with anybody in the world. And I always believed that, but now to have that on paper, that really made me feel like I belonged, like everything, all the effort I put in was now coming to fruition.
And when, I was just looking, and you have a lot of your top wins are against American players, including Isner. So is that something that you've known them and you've trained with them, and that's a familiarity, or is that random, or what are your thoughts?
Definitely early on in my career. I mean, in Wimbledon, I beat I beat Tiafoe, Fritz, and Kozlov. So I was always playing these Americans, and I always had something. I mean, for the longest period of time, I still have a winning record against almost every American, or it's close. So I think I've gotten to a point where when I play an American, it's just a little added like ego boost almost, where we have to, have that winning record against them. But no, nothing at this point. It's kind of come to a stage where it doesn't matter. When we were fighting for wild cards and positions and notoriety and stuff, it was an issue. It was like, okay, I have to beat him to make other people know that I'm one of the top Americans still. So it was kind of that little added pressure.
I like it. If there's like a grudge match, all-American tournament only, I'm putting all my chips on you for sure.
I appreciate that.
I got a few more questions. I just want to say anything to the panel, and then we'll open it up to you guys to ask additional questions. So couple different ones is, I guess, talking about physical fitness. We just had a nutritionist Saturday that spoke to the kids as well doing one of these calls. So I just wanted to touch upon that, like your nutrition, your daily nutrition. I mean, what do you like to eat, and how do you prepare before, during, and after matches?
Yeah, I mean, don't judge me during quarantine right now. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in a household. I mean, my parents were great, but they were big into health. So the snacks, I mean, the cereals we had were Special K and Cheerios. We couldn't even have Honey Nut Cheerios. So it was one of those families where like pretzels were snacks. And, so I grew up with that idea. My mom put pepper in my soda when I was 2 years old, so I'd hate the taste of it. These were the people I grew up with. So yeah, I mean, obviously I ventured out, and, I eat some stuff here and there, and I'll eat unhealthy a lot and after tournaments, but, I've tampered with a lot of different things. I mean, I'm kind of lactose intolerant, so I stem away from that during training and tournaments. I've now stemmed away from red meat during tournaments as well, slows me down. But I think at certain ages, like starting around 11, 12, I think is kind of a good place to start understanding what you're putting into your body. It doesn't mean you have to go paleo or you have to go vegan or whatever the case may be. And I know on social media, you see all this stuff with these Instagram models, and everybody has an opinion. I think it's just knowing what you put into your body, knowing that you can have, one of the normal things you eat has 500 ingredients that you don't know about, and it gets tricky. So I think just kind of understanding that doesn't mean change everything, but understanding what you're eating, how it affects you. Just a little bit more knowledge can be beneficial. And then once you get older, you can start figuring out what works for you and your body, what gives you more energy or less, because obviously what fuels your body is very important in this physical sport of tennis.
And just kind of going back to the work ethic part, because nutrition, mental toughness, and work ethic. So when you say, I'm going to outwork everyone, or I'm going to be the toughest one, can you give me an example of if you've ever trained or seen somebody to say, well, this guy doesn't really have that work ethic? Is that like, how do you judge that? Or what I'm looking for is more specific answer. How do you know that you're working hard? What are the reps or things that you can judge yourself on? Because that's, I think, tough for kids to know. Are they really working hard compared to their competition? And
here's going to be the worst answer, and they don't want to hear it. You never know. You only know by trying. So you can look at somebody else, and we all do this because it's such a competitive individual sport. You always look elsewhere for ideas like, oh, this guy's doing this, let me do this, or this and this, and that's the winning way. Even stuff that works for Federer may not work for you. So it's about trying. For me, 6 hours a day of tennis isn't great. Are there times where I need to be playing 4 or 5 hours? Yes. But for the most part, 6 hours a day is not ideal for me. I know that from trying it out. I know that from doing it. So I think it's only about figuring out what works for you and listening to your body and your mind and not lying to yourself, which is the toughest aspect in the world. I mean, we do it on a daily basis. It's sitting yourself down and being brutally honest and saying, A, I put in the effort and I have to do it differently or smarter, or B, hey, I'm not working hard enough. I have to do this, this, or this. So we can all work harder in certain areas, but it's about working smarter, which is very difficult to know what areas. So you have to try it. People asked me the other day, like, how long do you warm up before a match? And I'm like, it's personal. It's up to you. I mean, I'm at a point where I don't need much time. Nadal needs an hour and 20 minutes sometimes before a match. He does like a full practice. I'm a guy who needs 20 minutes. So it's really personally, and this from the ages of 10 to 17, that's what it's used for. I know it's tough because you're trying to get into colleges or make a pathway, but those ages, that's when you start experimenting with this stuff, and it hopefully doesn't take you that long to figure out everything. But this is the time where you start, have an understanding of what works for you.
I think that's a really great, really, really great answer. Finding your own way is the key. So
personal sport.
Yeah. So let's move on to one of your other passions, Behind the Racquet, where you can obviously speak about it much better than me, but you're interviewing tennis players and getting to know, digging down to the truth behind things. So my questions that we got from Karen and a few different kids: how did you come up with the idea? And how do you get the guests to share their laundry with you, dirty laundry?
Yeah, it was the idea kind of came because I saw some issues in the sport of tennis, and this sport I love so much and dedicated my life, but I saw some issues and it led to mental health problems which weren't really spoken about. So the first step was opening up the conversation about mental health. So that was one of the inspirations. The second one was, in an individual sport like tennis, we don't have the luxury of saying, hey, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm going to follow the New York Knicks. It doesn't happen that way. You could follow a country, but then you don't get that same intimate feel. You have to know the person deep down. You have to relate to them to really, I think, follow their journey. So I think for a lot of people that weren't tennis, like obsessive tennis fans, had a struggle to follow tennis because you're following individuals. So I wanted to bring this new component to tennis where you can relate to them on a deeper level. So it was difficult in the beginning because I didn't know what players were going to, say. I didn't know how they would experience this because I was asking them very tough questions. But I had some friends that were very brave, and they were the first ones to be a part of it. Ernesto Escobedo, Chris Eubanks, Mitchell Kruger, Jamie Loeb, and they opened up about a lot of tough things, and that paved the way for the rest of the people. So I think the players trust me because I'm not media. And when media comes to them and approaches them, they don't answer questions the same than when a friend or competitor does. So, and I also give them final say. So I think it's this safe component that allows them to open up. And, we built this platform now that is pretty incredible. It's great to see people a part of it.
I mean, you've been getting a lot of press lately because of especially the Coco Gauff one. And just letting everyone know, it goes to New York Times, USA Today, BBC, and now Legacy. So I'm glad that we've got the exclusive coverage here. Um, has there been any response from players being like, oh, I wish I didn't say that? I read everything, so I know that you give them the final approval and everything's in quotes, so they're comfortable. But even like I felt like Coco was misquoted a little bit in what she posted, and they're like, all of a sudden Coco is depressed, and that's not what the point was. So do you feel any sense of responsibility, or how does that work?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was in I did another piece with the New York Times a couple of days ago, and BBC spoke about it. I take it's not misquoted, let's say, because again, I give them final approval. This is what they said. But for somebody of that age to use a word like depressed, there's ways to go about it. I think that's an open discussion. There's a lot of sadness going on. There's a lot of people that are depressed that haven't been diagnosed yet. So I didn't go deep enough into it to figure out what she was feeling. And that's a trigger word for a lot of people. With that being said, yeah, I've had other experiences and other posts. I actually had to take one post down with Mark Pullman's about his growing up in South Africa. That's not there anymore because there were some issues there. So, but for the most part, people are very happy to share their story. They're hugging and crying and thanking me for giving them the ability to share it. But again, I'm trying to do it as organic as possible. I'm trying to make it the safest place to allow them to share their story and allow them to open up, which in a place like social media, which I'm sure all these kids know is a very tough place. You get hate mail, you get this, you get that. I've built this program to be a pretty safe place with a lot of positive reinforcement. So I'm trying to keep that going, and that's it.
I personally want to say I really enjoy. I haven't read all of them. I read a lot of them, and I feel that it's nice to know that these people feel the same way I feel, that I'm not the only one that feels this way. And, I think for me, just like Robin Soldering one was really great. And just talking about the pressure of after beating Rafa, that he's like, oh, I'm not done, and those kinds of things. And I'm sure everybody gravitates to something differently. So I really personally enjoy them. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
So now we're going to open up to the last few questions. Well, not last few, but we have limited time. Everybody feel free. If I didn't answer or ask your question that you submitted, you can submit it now in the chat, and I would be happy to ask. We have one of them is from Armand Patel. What is your favorite shot?
Ooh, that backhand downline winner is probably the cleanest I have in my favorite shot. When I'm hitting it well, that's definitely my favorite shot.
Okay, that's good. Mahi Patel wants to know, who is your favorite tennis player and why?
Ooh, that's difficult. It's difficult. I think it's the people that I relate to. So, I mean, he just retired. David Ferrer was probably the guy that I always looked up to when he was 4 in the world and would never lose to anybody ranked below him. I think that was an incredible career, and he, maximized everything he had.
Nice. Let's see what else we get. Okay, here we go. Ishan wants to know, who was the hardest opponent you've ever played?
Federer was not easy.
Took a set. Sorry, I didn't even mention that. You took a set off of Roger, right?
Oh, I know. I had 3 set points.
Oh, 3 set points? Okay.
3 set points. That's difficult to say. I mean, he has to be one of my toughest opponents. I played Fognini, who I took to a 3rd in Geneva. That was a really tough one. Probably one of the toughest players I played against. But yeah, I mean, everybody brings a new bag of tricks, it seems like nowadays. So everybody's very unique.
All right, we have Sean wants to know, I saw your story in 60 Minutes where you talked about what a grind it is out there in the tournament circuit. Beside all the difficulties, what is your favorite thing about this way of life?
I think use the word networking, that's an awful word. It sounds so business, but the people I've met and the cultures I've been introduced to, and the fact that I've been able to do what I love for a living, even though I think, all the players around my ranking deserve more money and blah, I could talk about that for days, but to play something I love, which is hitting a little yellow fuzzy ball, and to do that around the world and to meet some incredible people, I mean, has been an absolute honor. And I wouldn't have changed my childhood or anything I've done for that. I mean, it's been truly remarkable to look at my phone and just see all the pictures and all the people I've met. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people have the opportunity to.
Thanks. Go, guys. I know you have a few more questions, couple more questions. I'll ask one while I'm waiting from them. If you're a dream tournament to win and dream opponent in the finals.
I mean, it's tough. I mean, US Open is actually not my favorite Grand Slam, but I think the idea of playing night match Arthur Ashe Stadium, I mean, that's my backyard. That is the pinnacle of tennis in my head. I think having that and then the ability to play Nadal on clay once has always been a dream of mine. For me, that is the most dominant tennis player of all time is Rafael Nadal on clay court, and I just want to feel what that is like. I played with him, practicing with many times on hard court at the US Open, trained with him, but to play him on clay and to know what that feels like, I think that would be special.
So real quick, following up on Rafa, since you practice, and he's known for great work ethic and being fast, and you're known for having great work ethic and being fast. What are those practices like?
No. Yeah, you look at my work ethic, and again, we're talking about a very slim percentage of the world, but compare what I think is a great work ethic. I mean, this is another level. It's not even human. It's really not. I mean, it almost deters me away from tennis because he's insane. I mean, it's robotic the way he goes about it. I mean, we practiced for an hour and a half before his match once. He didn't even take a water break. It just seems like it's insane what he can do. So, I mean, that was inspirational to say the least. And the way the diligence on every shot, not missing a ball, out of this world. It really was.
Nice. All right. We have a question from April. What is your biggest obstacle with training in this pandemic?
Hitting a tennis ball. Haven't hit a tennis ball in a month. I mean, I'm staying in okay shape. Definitely not working out as much as I would because a lot of my workouts are on court. I just haven't hit a tennis ball, which is okay to take a break from. Now, besides my tennis career, I just miss hitting a tennis ball. I just want to do it. So hopefully if the weather opens up, I have a few private courts that I know that I can hit with my father and, we keep it safe. So that would be okay. But I'm really just missing that feeling.
Yeah. I did see you serve on the street. So just
I did do a few of those I know on the street.
Chite wants to know, what is the best way to improve rhythm on the serve?
For me, I've been pretty fortunate. I have a pretty lively arm. So for me, it's about keeping it simple. When I put too much knee bend into it or there's too many moving parts, that's where I feel like it's very tough to time it. I get it very difficult. So over my career, I've just allowed for simplicity to take over where just throw a ball, get that arm going with simple knee bend that allows you to use your force into the ground, but never getting stuck in any position, keeping it smooth. So I know that's, it's tough to really talk about that without showing it, but that's the best way I can describe it.
I guess I'll ask one more, and then we'll let one more guest attendee question. My question for you is, when things get back to normal, what are you looking to improve upon your game, or what are some of your goals for when things get back to normal?
Sadly, I was playing pretty well before this pandemic. It was the last 3 tournaments I was playing pretty solid tennis with how I wanted to play. So I think it's really about allowing myself to continue that way and knowing it might not be as good as when I was doing it 6 months ago or a year ago, whenever we get back. But I think it's still playing that way, going back to what I know is best and just trusting that game and going along with it.
Nice. And I guess we'll go with my question since no one's typed. I'm going to give 5 more seconds to see if anybody.
My favorite Grand Slam is Australian Open, by the way.
Australian Open. Okay. Yeah. That's good.
Did Air break his racket? He was a strange one. He was funny. He had some harsh words to say about me after that. He actually recently apologized for me on Twitter. That was funny. He said I was the worst tennis player he's ever played against. And then I said something, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry about that. I was young back then." But no, it's funny. Friends with most of the guys at this point, so it's been good.
Aaron Sandler wants to know, do you think serve and volley will exist in future tennis?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of the guys that were serve and volleyers. You're talking about the McEnroes and all these others that, master that. And they've said it themselves, they don't see the serve and volleying to be a thing because of how great the returners are. I mean, serve and volleying against Djokovic, you literally have to have an Ivo Karlovic or John Isner serve to manage to get a volley that's good enough. I mean, these guys are returning so extremely well. And if you give them a target to hit, 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, they're going to hit that target. So I don't think serve and volleying, I think that's a thing of the past. I don't think that's one of, the tactics that will ever really come back. I think it's something that you can throw in. I know a lot of players that throw it in after a while, just mixing it up. I think that's super important, but not as a full tactic.
I'm sorry, I got a few questions all of a sudden. I got a bunch of questions coming up. One is where do you currently train? And the other one is which players did you look up growing up?
So I'm back in New York. I'm training in different places, but working with my coach that I grew up with, Lawrence Klager at Sport Time, which is now the John McEnroe Tennis Academy. So working with him. What was the second one?
Who did you, when you were younger, who did you look up to? Who were your favorite tennis players?
Growing up was basically 3, I would say, just style, fight, tennis-wise, and a little bit different on one front. James Blake was definitely the outlier. I just loved his game, loved his passion. And the 2 that I related to myself and wanted to kind of be like was Nalbandian and Lane Hewitt were the 2 that I kind of looked up at that time.
Well, you like the backends, so.
The backends.
That makes sense. I guess what I want to know is how can people stay in touch with you? How can they, where should they follow you if they want to get more information on you and the amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I do a lot of live Q&As. I do one every Sunday now on Behind The Racquet on Instagram. So Instagram and Twitter are the main parts. So either Behind The Racquet or Noah Rubin 33. And then if you just solely want to follow everything I do with Behind The Racquet, BehindTheRacquet.com is a really easy place. Has all my merchandise, podcasts, has all the stories uploaded there. It's a pretty simple way to look at it and much easier to look at it on your computer than phone as well.
Awesome. Well, Noah, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you all for attending as well. I got so much great knowledge. I'm sure you guys did as well. So Noah, good luck with everything tennis and Behind the Racquet as well. And I'm sure we'll stay in touch. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Best of luck, guys. Thanks for coming, everybody.